So we have Tatiana Ginzburg now from the University of Latvia, talking about adult students' perceptions of studying English in face-to-face, online and blended modalities.
Okay, well, thank you. Great, great to be here, and actually thank you, Rachel, for and the team for bringing up adult learning, adult students here, although my students are not taking a degree course. So to give a quick background, we are still, everybody went online, but there was still this skepticism about whether online or other not traditional modalities, so-called, are still as effective as the golden standards of face-to-face one. And speaking of adults, it's especially important because adult participation of adult learners in education is below what is needed. It's very difficult to keep on to them because, cancellation cost is low. They might not stay long enough. On the other hand, learning effectiveness, or rather teaching effectiveness, can be looked at from different perspectives. How students perceive it, how we educators, how we see the learning outcomes, how well they retain the knowledge. Now, the way students perceive it is very important, especially for adult learners. They need to see and believe that they are getting, value for their either money or time or both. And unfortunately, or fortunately, most data comes from undergraduate students, which is easily explainable. Undergraduate students are there to be researched. Now, I happen to be in a situation when this is sponsored by University of Latvia, but I work for Riga Technical University, Riga Business School, where I'm head of the English Language Center. And we happened to teach the same course to the same type of students, which are RTU academics, English language, and we taught them in a face-to-face, in an online, and in a blended format. At 3 different academic years, the same course to the same demographic. So this is comparable data. So that's how I came up with the research idea, and I'm not talking about the whole of this idea, but just about what marks it bold. So we place students in a group based on their level. Then there is a course, and as you can see in 3 different years, this is standard face-to-face course, this is flipped online, and this is flipped blended. That is, once a week they meet online, once a week they meet face-to-face. And then we used student evaluation of teaching as a final evaluation of the course. Then there is an idea, and there is a delayed proficiency test. I test them a year after the course to get the idea how much is left in their heads, so to speak, knowledge retention. And then after that, I interview students, talk to them, both as students and as educators, because they are educators. So today I'm talking about qualitative, well, only this part. So the first results from students, I analyzed tests, and these are, Likert scale questions related to teachers, materials, blah, blah, blah. I used both ANOVA and Kruskal-Wallis just in case, and the results are that the mean values are not, the differences are not statistically significant. However, the results of face-to-face test surveys from face-to-face class and online are very close, and they are higher. They prefer these to blended course. That's the result of their survey. On the other hand, when I interviewed students, which are academics, out of 9 people, 7 said that they think that blended variant is optimal. And the topic that came out, the main theme that came out of these interviews is, okay, well, the teacher is important. They all felt that the course had effects on them. They do see advantages of online learning, and by experiential learning, I meant that as educators, they analyzed what language teachers were doing in their classes, and they were ready, or some of them have already started transferring that to their own teaching. Surprisingly, though, when we analyzed SET's final evaluations from our general students, that is, people who are not funded by an EU project, about those who pay for their classes and come in the evenings, the blended variant was an absolute champion. So I'm now wondering whether whether the source of funding makes a difference, because when people pay for their classes, they are sort of more demanding, and RTU academics, of course, they value their well-being. Maybe they were too stressed out as academics and as educators themselves. That's referring back to what Rachel was just talking about. So maybe they suffered from imbalance work life, but still it seems that they do tend to blend it, to favor blended format. I do realize that samples are relatively small, and I'm waiting still until this June to test the final batch of students to see how well, what the knowledge retention, comparative knowledge retention is. Okay, and yeah, well, thank you. And yeah, I have to mention that this is funded by a grant from a University of Latvia. Thanks to this, to COVID, I at my age started the PhD program, the PhD studies. Okay.
Thanks, Tatiana. Okay, so do we have any questions from the room to start with? If not, I've got some, I've kind of made some notes on. I wondered, first of all, what the decision-making was behind the choice to go blend. Obviously, you were kind of face-to-face kind of pre-pandemic, I assume, then you went online, I guess, by necessity. Again, I'm assuming. Then afterwards, you went for the blend. So was there a reason for that, rather than going back to face-to-face?
Okay, all right. That was my decision, basically. And that was my brainchild. I actually thought that there are several, well, 2 basic reasons. Number one, language is very much a communication tool, and we teach language for communication as an additional language. We now communicate actively both face-to-face and online. So it makes sense to teach language in both these modalities simply because it became authentic. That's one reason. Another reason is convenience, especially for adults. We demand, in our courses, we demand minimum 75% of attendance. And if adult people go on a business trip or wherever, it's just convenient for them to join an online class rather than miss a class. Just like I was supposed to be in London today, but I got ill, so I'm using online option to join the conference. And also, yeah, and also commuting to class, to the center of the city where we teach is is an added burden for students, so it's convenient for them.
Thank you. Just in relation to your research, you did mention briefly about kind of how you plan to kind of extend it. I just wonder if you could kind of go into a bit more detail about what you're actually going to do. You do talk about kind of quantitative earlier as well, and also kind of do you have any kind of plans for kind of the impact of that research in terms of embedding it into kind of how you do things?
Sorry. Quantitative. If I got your question, yeah, there is a quantitative part. Well, first of all, this sets, student evaluation of teaching, are calculated. You know, the values, the mean values are calculated, and also the knowledge retention is actually a quantitative part. I mean, the way I'm doing it is I assume that students reach a certain level of of language according to Common European Framework of languages, A1, B2, C1, if you are familiar with that. And then a year after the course, I gave them, I will administer a proficiency test, which defines their current level of knowledge. And then the difference, I'm calculating how much they lost, if they lost. And then I compare the average loss of knowledge between these three modalities. So, and I do inferential statistics afterwards. So that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, question from the floor?
Yeah, this is a really basic question, but I noticed in the last sort of set, the blended one, there were a lot more participants. Like I think you went from 34 to 52. And I guess I was just wondering do you have a sense of why even so many more participants in the blended scenario? Is it just like what you're saying, where there's a variety of, that's maybe more accessible to people, or if, yeah, maybe you're not hearing me very well, so I don't know if you could.
Can you hear okay? Or do you need to?
Not quite.
Okay to come up, is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi there. Sorry, we're because you're there. No. Can you hear me better now?
Sort of, yes.
Speak lightly.
Yeah, if you speak, maybe distinctly.
Why do you think there were so many more participants in the blended set of students as opposed to the other ones? I think it went from something like 34 to 50 something.
Oh, just a second. Why there were, no, these were just people who filled out the form.
Oh.
And let me see. Yeah, I mean, the number of sets, the number of evaluations.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood I was thinking that there were like sort of, I thought there were a notably more number, like there were more people involved in the blended scenario as opposed to the others, but maybe I just misunderstood that on your slide.
Not necessarily, no. It's just that the number of people who filled out the evaluation form, and that's it. Basically, they sort of, in a way, they could have chosen, but they didn't have any, any idea of what was going to be their class, what their class is going to be. But they could have chosen not to participate in the course, and many of them didn't, not because of their modality, but because the timing was wrong for them. They had too many of their, remember, these are academics, so they had too much of their own teaching, for example, at that semester, so they chose not to. But basically that's why it's not an experiment, but it's a quasi-experiment. They were assigned a modality just because there was no choice for them.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming up. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, I'd like us to show our appreciation to Tatiana.